Hello to everyone that's on our webinar this evening. You're all very welcome to the webinar, which is titled Reflecting on 2023 with PastureBase Ireland. My name is Joseph Dunphy from the Grassland team, and I'm delighted to be joined by Looney from the Grassland department in Moore Park, Ciaran Hearn from PastureBase Ireland, and last but certainly not least, Patrick O Neill, dairy farmer from County Longford. Okay, so roughly over the next hour, we'll be going through a few bits and pieces on PastureBase. A little bit of housekeeping before we get going for the evening. This webinar is being recorded, and this webinar, along with all the previous webinars we've done over the last couple of years, are all available on the Grass 10 website. So if you just go Google Grass 10, Teagasc Grass 10, go down the left-hand side of the page, you'll see the webinars subheading, and you'll be able to see any of the previous webinars we've done. There's a poll there that's there, should have popped up on your screen before you started there this evening, or as you came in there this evening. If you might fill it out first, that'd be great. Any questions for any of our panelists here tonight, you might just put them into the Q&A box as well. And just another little bit, I suppose, there's probably people who are new to these webinars here tonight. And look, a good few people on the call will be aware of the Grass 10 newsletter. But for people who aren't aware of it, the newsletter that comes out is produced by the Grass 10 team every week, for most of the grazing year. And if you want to register for that at any time, just go to the weekly newsletter subheading on the left hand side of the Grass 10 page, and you can hit the subscribe button, and you will get that newsletter every Tuesday evening in your emails. Okay, so the purpose of this webinar tonight, and again, I'm delighted to have a good team joining me here this evening. And look at it's to really have a dig into PastureBase reports and see how we can make best use of them. All right, but I suppose coming back from that is, really about why we use PastureBase and why we try to do as much as we can in terms of the measurements on PastureBase and building information into it. It comes back to grassland management. So how the input costs have put pressure on profitability in Irish farms. We want to see how you using PastureBase can be in the top 5% for grazing management in 2024. So the improvements that you can make you aware of all the different reports that if you're doing a number of years in terms of measuring on PastureBase, you're building an awful lot of information. How you can review what information is there and using this data then to drive better decision making on your farm. All right, so we'll go through a few slides on that first. Then we're going to have, I suppose, a 12-month update again from Ciaran Hearn from PastureBase Ireland, going through some of the totals for 2023. We'll get an overview of Patrick O Neill's farm, and maybe just a quick overview then with Caitlin on the Clover 150 program, which Patrick is in, I suppose, in terms of driving the amount of clover that's on his farm and reducing the nitrogen, which is has been a key part of the program over the last couple of years. And then we're going to dig into Patrick's PastureBase reports then to identify areas of improvement. So very, very important, I suppose, just linking in again, and why PastureBase is so essential. And these are just a couple of key points from the dairy conference there last week. I think it kind of sets the scene very, very well. If we look at the costs that have gone on in terms of feed costs on Irish farms, there's been a 54% increase in feed costs on Irish farms. So it has never been more important to be a good grassland farmer. Okay, so if we take, for example, there in the green box over on the left-hand side, we see feed and fertilizer accounted for 15 cents a litre of the costs in Irish dairy farms. And there was an interesting webinar there a couple of weeks ago, an interesting podcast there on the Dairy Edge, which there was an advisor reviewing the fall in milk price, and the fall in the milk price in 2023 was 15 cents a litre. So if all you think back on how much you spent last year on fertilizer and feed, that was what has fallen in terms of milk price this year. So it's a phenomenal amount. Okay, so the cost control is huge. If we look on the beef side of things, and probably again in 2023 there was a 24 to 20% increase in the total input costs, okay, of which meal and fertilizer are a huge cost. And I suppose that coupled with the cost, but also we require more feed on farms. There's higher stock rates on farm. If we look at the national stats, we're producing more kilos of milk solids. It's on the dairy stats. We're producing more kilos of milk solids on Irish farms over the last 10 years, gone from 350 kilos of milk solids to 441. Milk and platform stock rates are gone from 2 to 2.7 livestock units per hectare. So it's vital, and it's becoming more and more important all the time that, the better grassland manager you are, the bigger difference it's going to make to your overall profitability on the farm. All right. And I suppose, what does it take to be excellent? And what we see is essential to be an excellent in terms of a grassland manager. Okay, the grazing infrastructure. Okay, having a map farm, 2 gaps per paddock, water and road raise is, I suppose, is a key thing, which is probably on 70%, probably on 70% of dairy farms around the country. All right. Clover-based, low chemical end swards. Okay, so again, we see this as being a key point going forward. We probably see about 20, for farmers to have 25% of the grazing platform in high levels of clover. We're talking about less than 5% of farms in 2023 have that. On the soil fertility, okay, the soil fertility is absolutely essential. And when we talk about having 50% of your grazing platform at an optimum pK and pH, okay, so that means that you send your soil sample off that it ticks the box for every one. Okay, less than 30% of farms have that in 2022. Okay, so that's going to be a key thing going forward, as we talked about already. Lower nitrogen, going out on farm. We're coming out of 2 years of high prices. It is reducing back, thank God, but it's still, we're going to have lower in availability, with the way policy is going in the future. So it's very, very important that we get the soil fertility right. And just by having that right, we're going to grow more grass and grow more pasture at the shoulders of the year, as we are. Okay. Another key thing, grassland measurement. Okay, so about 5% of farmers in 2023 have more than this is about a week ago. So have more than 30 measures done. So probably a few more people doing closing covers over the last week or two. But still, we're talking about a small number of people that are driving the measures per on PastureBase that we want. Okay, so it's a key thing what we see as being important. Doing a spring feed budget and rotation planners. Okay, we see this as essential as well, and we're somewhere between 7 and 15% of farms have that in 2023. So really, we're talking about people, excellence in grazing management. We're probably seeing people who are ticking all of those boxes. We're talking about 5% of farmers currently. So for people that are on our webinar tonight, I suppose to set the scene, take a picture of that. We feel that these are things that you can go after now next year. And okay, maybe the clover one is going to be a little bit, that's more of a step approach, and we'll hear from Patrick in a few minutes, but on how he has got the clover on the farm over the last couple of years, but on the soil fertility as well. But the grass and measurement, the spring feed budget, and the rotation planners, and all fertilizers recorded on PastureBase, they're something that you can make a right good effort at as we start next spring. Okay. So, without further ado, as I said, any questions tonight for any of our panelists, stick them into the Q&A box. And Ciaran, I might throw it over to you for a bit of an intro onto the PastureBase year.
Yeah, thanks very much, Joe. So yeah, we're just going to have a look at some of the updates to PastureBase and some of the figures coming out of it, I suppose. So if we'll just have a quick look there now at kind of what's happened this year. And so the big thing this year, that there has been a large increase in the usage of PastureBase in 2023. So we've had last year we had about 3,500 users recording more than 10 covers, and that's gone up to 6,000 already this year. So we've had a big jump, and we'll have a look at that in a second in a little bit more detail. But I suppose the key thing to remember there, as Joe was saying, the 30 walks are important, and the more that you put into PastureBase, the more you'll get out of it, right? So the more data you feed into it, the more you'll get out for yourself, and that's something to remember, and it's something that we're going to talk about in the reports a little bit later on. And I suppose just an example of that is just the graphic that you see there on the right. So we've just taken that from Patrick's farm, just the most recent fertilizer applications. Now it's just a list, but it just there highlights the level of clover that Patrick has on the farm, and it's something that you can readily use when you're doing your fertilizer plan or your fertilizer application. And it's a really easy color-coded thing to have. All you need to do is have your clover percentages in on it. So it's a quick job you can do there a couple of times in the year moving forward next year. I suppose just in terms of refining that functionality on PastureBase, so we have moved into kind of more detailed reports. So talking about that clover report that's available now, we are looking at the PastureBase scorecard in a minute, and looking at the farm summary report in detail, and looking at the grass report in particular. So they are there available for you. And as I said, if you have the data gone in, you really should be looking at that data in its summary form in those reports. Next year as well, we'll be looking at rolling out the grass grow predictions, and we talk about that later. But those grass grow predictions are available on a per county basis, and they're updated twice a week at the moment on the front of PastureBase. So you don't even have to log in, just a quick look there to see what's going on in your own locality. The farm mapping tool is there, and there are a large amount of farms now mapped on PastureBase, but it allows you that feedback, that immediate feedback of the fertilizer maybe you put out in the last round, or just the soil nutrient status of the paddocks, quickly available kind of at your fingertips there. So the more detailed you make that map, the more it's going to give you back as well. And as I said, there's going to be greater integration then across these components. Kind of that's what we've been working on a lot this year, and it should be more intuitive as you move forward using PastureBase. Maybe users that have been using for a couple of years might find that now and moving into next year. Just to note there, we have a message in the chat there. If you have any feedback or any ideas or anything like that, you're the people using PastureBase on a daily basis. We can only know so much from our use of it, but you're the experts, and you giving us feedback really helps us to optimize and develop PastureBase to the best of our abilities. So anything that you have there, fire it into the chat. So yeah, if we look at the covers then recorded, so we can see there the yellow line is 2023, and the last 3 years are also represented on this graph. So we can see there that in the middle of the summer this year, or maybe even towards August, the number of covers recorded per week kind of peaked up over 4,500. So there was serious use of PastureBase at that time of year. And Patrick will probably touch on it later on in terms of when you're getting to that 30 walks in the year, the real time to be focusing on doing covers is when the grass is growing. And that's reflected here where we see the large amount of covers in the summer period. As I said, it's jumped significantly in terms of the amount of users on it, but also the amount of usage they're getting out of it. So that's pleasing to see from this year. And from that, then I suppose we can look at a detailed grass growth measurement. So this is some of the output that we can get from PastureBase. And looking at the grass growth curve from this year, a lot of you would be familiar with various publications who would take this data from PastureBase and maybe put it out in local groups and things. But I suppose the point I'll make here, just where we have the two bits highlighted. So we all know this year there was challenges with the weather in terms of grass growth, and there was challenges last year with the opposite problem of it got dry at the end of 2022 or the end of the summer of 2022. So if we look here, we had like a small dry period for some people, kind of early June, late May, early June, and there was a dip in growth that we see there at that time point in the year. But it wasn't as severe, I suppose, as the dry period of 2022. So the grass growth this year was actually fairly on trend for the average of the 5 years. Now, as we'll see in a minute, the average of that 5 years was down a little bit maybe on what happened previously, and we'll talk about the reasons for that in a minute. But I suppose it's just to bear in mind, while grazing conditions might have been challenging, growth was fairly similar, and this is true most of the country as well from the data that we've been looking at. So yeah, moving on to grass production and the actual tonnages that we got on farms. So I suppose just to bear in mind now, this is from farms that have been doing over 30 covers. So probably the higher end of the spectrum of the people that are growing a lot of grass and maybe really looking after their grazing management principles through the year. The point from this, I suppose, is that grass growth from the last 3 years is fairly similar. I know we can talk about there was a ton difference between 2021 and 2022, and that was probably caused by that dry period. And we're back up a little bit again this year, back up about a half a ton, I suppose. But the trend is down a little bit, say, from 2020 and 2019, where we were we're back a good ton from that. And I suppose if we think back to the fertilizer sales, nitrogen has been back year on year now for 2 years. So while the overarching goal is to get clover onto swards and to get that nitrogen coming from that source. We have to remember that grass is still the cheapest source of feed on farms, and trying to push back towards that 13 ton mark is going to be a real goal, I think, for next year, particularly with the cost of inputs going up all the time, as Joe was saying earlier. So I suppose just to bear in mind, maybe go out and do that assessment, have a look, rank those paddocks on their clover content, and the ones that maybe don't have enough, particularly in the springtime, maybe to just have that in the back of your mind about boosting that growth. So we're heading back towards the growths that we were getting in 2019 and 2020. So then looking at the beef farmers, I suppose the gap here is a lot more noticeable between, say, what happened in between 14 and 17 and what happened in the last 5 or 6 years. So there has been a drop off. The key takeaway here, I suppose, is that there was a lot of silage made on beef farms this year, and it's great to have that amount of silage made, and it shows that there's good grass decisions being made in terms of surpluses being taken out. And while there was a little bit of concern, I know, around the country about fodder supplies and stuff, from pasture-based data, we were able to establish that a lot of people have completed fodder budgets, and the picture is actually looking fairly spot on, given we were a little bit worried about it there towards the end of the summer. But given the surveys that have been done by a couple of my colleagues as well here in Moore Park, we're actually fairly okay for what we have in stock on farms at the moment. Obviously, individual cases are different, and I would encourage people to do a fodder budget and just check, their own stocks and make sure that they have enough for maybe a longer winter period in case there's poor conditions in the spring. But generally, the production was fairly in line with what we've seen previously. Again, the sheep farms can be a little bit more variable as we don't quite have the numbers of sheep farmers on pasture base that we would like to have, but the data is fairly solid. Again, we see the difference between 17 and all the other years, and maybe a drop off from pre-17 and post-17. Again, part of that is going to be the lack of maybe nitrogen that's gone out in those swards, and it's worth bearing in mind, as Joe said, to get the most out of your nitrogen, you do need to be soil testing all your farm, and you do need to be looking at your P&K status in particular in order to optimize the return on investment on that nitrogen that goes out. So for the beef and sheep farms, I definitely encourage people to do your soil test and to link in with the soil lab on PastureBase. We don't have the numbers that we'd like to have. The option is there. You can get it automatically uploaded, and again, then it's at your fingertips. So something to bear in mind for those sheep farmers that are looking to optimize grass production, as it's going to make up the absolute vast majority of the diet of these sheep. So just looking at the per county data, which was quite interesting, I suppose. Joe, if we just flick up the next part of that for a second, and we just look at the differences between counties. So you can all see the counties there along the bottom of the graph, and just the tons there on the side. And I suppose the reason I'm highlighting this is that if we look at the two circles on the left first, so we have Carlow and Kilkenny, and we all know they're right beside each other down there in the southeast. Very, very good land in most of the county for both sets for both places. And we can see there's a difference of 3.5 ton between the counties, and I suppose a lot of that is probably down to management. Now, there are obviously parts of Carlow that are a little bit more mountainy maybe than other parts of it, but it just highlights that there is a possibility to grow maybe more grass if you're pushing a little bit, and location isn't going to make that much of a difference, because if we look over on the right, we're looking at Monaghan and Sligo. Wouldn't be regarded as grass-growing hotspots of the country, particularly compared to Kilkenny, but they're very similar to the 4 bars on the right: Waterford, Westmeath, Wexford, and Wicklow, who would all grow decent levels of grass. So I suppose the point I'm making, while there is some variation in this graph, where you are is not going to dictate how much grass you grow as much as the person management is going to dictate how much grass you grow. So looking at some of the features that we're kind of implementing at the moment and that we're hoping to implement in early 2024 on PastureBase. So the first one, and Joe is going to talk about in a minute with Patrick, is going to look at the scorecard that's available on PastureBase. So the scorecard just gives you an idea of the data that you've put into PastureBase, and maybe guides you towards those reports and seeing what you can get back out of it. So it's not a criticism so much as an areas that you can improve on, and it auto fills in PastureBase now based on the data that you put into it. So there's no effort in it at all, only to open it and go through the reports and see where maybe you can improve on your grass measurement and your grazing management into 2024. So I suppose Another feature that we're going to bring in. So I mentioned earlier that there's grass grow predictions now available on a per county basis, but we're going to bring it in on an individual farm basis. And to start off with, this is really going to be for some of the guys that are maybe doing 35 plus walks in the year. And this is because to make a prediction for next year, we need good data from last year and maybe even the last couple of years. So we're doing it on a trial basis at the moment, and if we get good predictions from the model for the first kind of 3 or 4 months of the year, we'll start rolling it out to farmers that have done 30 walks, and maybe then rolling it out to farmers that have done less than 30 walks. Probably won't go down below 25, just because you're not going to get very good predictions based on lower walks than 30 really, and probably definitely not lower than 25. So it's it'll be done on a farm by farm basis, and we want to see how well it works, but it is definitely going to be rolled out, and we'll hopefully get it on a lot of farms into 2024. Again, we had some feedback, and this comes from you guys. This comes from you in terms of milk yield figures and meal fed. So we've implemented both of these this year. So a lot of you have your milk getting imported from your co-op, and up over 4,000 users of PastureBase get those milk figures in. But a lot of people don't realize that until now, you had to update the figure manually based on your own number of cows and stuff. But we're going to change that now, so the figure feeds in from the wedge. So just to automatically, or make it a bit more automatic and a bit easier to use as well. So just something to bear in mind if you're looking at your milk yield figures in the next into next year really. The meal fed figure as well is something we brought in this year, and it's not going to be 100% right, because people, when you're calving down in the spring, you mightn't update your cow numbers for a couple of weeks if you're not doing a walk. But I suppose it's more just to keep an eye on through the year, and to make sure you're not, if you have a target of 600 or 700 kilos of meal for the year, that you're not hitting that figure in the middle of June, I suppose. So just something to help you keep an eye on it, and whether or not you need to cut it back a little bit at that time of the year in particular. Again, we're going to have fodder budgets as well coming in on the app, so that you can go out in the yard and measure the amount of fodder that's available in the yard at any given time. And it'll be coming in a bit like a grass cover. You'll have a fodder cover as such, and it just helps you to keep an eye on it. Maybe even if you do it once every 2 weeks or once a month, just so you know where you are in terms of the amount of fodder that you have left in the yard, and how far into February or March that's going to get you, depending on your own targets for your own farm. A similar thing then we're going to bring in for the grass covers is a clover cover. So some feedback we got from some farmers is that they want to input their own clover scores, and to make that easier, we're going to get that onto the app. So it's probably going to come in early 2024 as well, and it's something that we think will really help with precision nitrogen application. Again, there's more options in the map, and that'll feed back from the nitrogen application. But as I said, it's the feedback that is germinating a lot of these ideas, and we always appreciate a little bit of feedback. We won't take it as criticism, I don't think.
Great stuff. It's massive stuff there, Ciaran. A lot of good work going on in PastureBase. Just a couple of quick questions before we move on to Caitlin. Will there be any option on PastureBase in the future where you can bring in maybe zero grazing instead of a supplementation?
Sorry, Joe, I meant to mention, I left it out there. Yeah, so at the moment you can put in your zero graze grass if you want to. It's an option where you're going to have to ring up the help desk to get them to just flick the switch basically for your account. But once it's flicked, or once that's turned on, you can fire away and use zero graze grass as a supplementation option. I suppose it's not something that everyone uses, so we didn't want to put it in as an automatic option.
Great, perfect. Probably one on the fertilizer recording, Ciaran. Who has access to your PastureBase account? In terms of, say, who can see your fertilizer, your data?
So there's 3 people essentially that can see that. So there's yourself, you're the user, it's your data, you own it. So that's the main thing, and then you have control over who else sees that. So it's anyone that has an advisor access to your account can see that, but again, you have to allow them access to see that data. So you can always disallow somebody to see that access, or turn off that consent if you want to. And the third person that can see it is me, and because I'm the admin of the whole system. So I suppose they're the 3 people really that can see that data, Joe.
Yeah, so no, it doesn't go any further. It doesn't go any
No,
further, really. Yeah.
no, and it
Okay.
never it never will, I suppose, Joe. Yeah, it
Yeah,
never will.
and that's the key point on it. And lastly, predicted growth. Is it able to be made available on the app?
We are going to, sorry, it is going to be on the app. So we're going to have an app update. We're still working on it, so I didn't want to put it in here, but we're going to look at an app update probably, I would say, February, March time. And once that's in, we're going to have the predictive growth for either your own farm or for your county on the app as well. So it'll be nice and handy there, touch of a button.
Brilliant. Super stuff. Okay, Ciaran, we'll move on, and thanks everyone for the questions there for Ciaran. I'll throw it over to you, Caitlin.
Great. Thanks a million, Joe. Thanks, Ciaran. So I suppose, Patrick, could you give us we're going to make it interactive. Welcome into the session, Patrick. So look, could you give us a quick background to your farm, Patrick?
Yeah, well, I suppose we're farming here in Edgestown in County Longford. I'm farming in partnership with Dad. We're making 115 cows. I suppose I came back to the farm in 2011. We're making 55, 60 cows, and we had beef stock and whatnot. And then I suppose as things progressed and I got more involved in the farm, we moved on stock numbers. And yeah, so that's where we're sitting now, 115 cows, 45 hectares. Yeah.
Great. And I saw, oh, sorry, I was going to say, Patrick, as you moved on stock numbers, you still target getting as much grass into the diet as possible. And look, I suppose the nature of the farm, it's in Longford, is it? You had a tough summer this year in terms of rain, but it is heavier by nature anyway.
Well, it is, yeah, but our farm would be quite mixed. We have some nice dry paddocks as well, but the bottoms will be wet. But no, we're not prone to getting washed out of it. But just this year, since July to the back end of the year, we've had a lot of wet weather, so ground was waterlogged more than anything else, so it was a tough year this year to grow grass, but yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose looking at your grassland performance in the year, I suppose you're back a ton in production on last year, which you could see from your reports on PastureBase. But look, you still made the effort. You did about 32 walks over the year, and your grazing season length is still over the national target. How did you find doing those walks on farm helped you? You still had a good pre-grazing yield in the mid-season. For the number of walks that you had.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, but generally in the summertime there, we're talking May, June, July. You're probably walking the farm 5 or 6 times in the month. You know what I mean? This year is probably back a little bit because we weren't getting the growth rates. But in general, yeah, it's vital for me to be walking the farm, especially during the summer, especially when the high growth rates. Just so you can be proactive and take out grass when you need to. But you didn't get a chance this year now the way things went. So.
And moving down as Joe went around, he said that to be an excellent grassland farmer, you're going to have to incorporate clover on the farm, and you've got about 54% of your area to date. How did you get to 54% in 2023?
Well, I suppose the clover started in 2018, maybe back end of 18. I decided to do a paddock with clover. Just look I had read somewhere that it increases the milk solids in the cows or whatever. So we chanced it and I put it in. Didn't know much about treating it now, but today it's still there and it's still growing good clover So then in 2020, Seamus Noah and Child's advisor there. So he rang me one day and I joined the Ballyhays Monitor Farm Group. So I met Donald Patton and a few very good farmers there who were also on this journey. And first year there, we talked about it, and then the following year, we met up with yourself and Mick Egan and the Clover 150 and joined that group. And so a lot of our clover now in the last, we'd say 2 to 3 years is either oversown or it's full reseed. So yeah, that's where we are.
Great, and you can see within that clover area, you have a very good clover content on those paddocks, and that's from getting that management in. You can see kind of the direct benefit. You mentioned the milk solids, but the benefit it's had on your chemical nitrogen on the milking platform has been huge as well.
Yeah, well, that's it. At the time, in my head, in 18, it was getting more milk out of the cows. But as things progressed, I was a bit suspect to the whole cutting back nitrogen thing, especially at the start. Like, you're putting in this clover hoping that it's going to do something. But like as the 2 years have gone by, it's really working. This year, like I think there was a paddock there, there might have been 120 units of nitrogen spreading it, and it's going up in 13 ton. Like, so like they don't all work, put it this way. Like some of them are a disaster, like, it depends on your pH or your values in the field, like, but it's definitely going forward. I think it's something that we're all going to have to look at, So
Yeah, and look, you mentioned it there, Patrick, that the soil fertility can have an effect on the clover, but your optimum soil fertility is 40% of the farm. So I suppose what you have in optimum has clover on it, and that you're targeting increasing that soil fertility across the farm.
yeah, definitely. Look at over the last 2 years, we probably spread 180 ton of lime, and we've been in the back end there. We spread a bag of K on any index that was low. So look, we're going to do a soil test now in January, and we'd be hoping that we've improved the farm somewhat. Yeah, that we're going to be able to get more clover in, like.
Super. So I suppose, look, the main figure there, Patrick, that you've discussed is, your tonnage was back on 2022, and Ciaran mentioned it's similar across farms in Ireland. But to see, you can utilize reports on PastureBase to see what's actually happening on your own farm, and I suppose you can do that because you have your high number of farm walks done. So if you look at the grass report on PBI, it kind of feeds into this, and you can do a comparison between your growth in 2022 versus your growth in 2023. And what happened there in May kind of followed the national average. So we can see there, you had a reduction in growth in May, June, but what happened in the summer, I suppose, wasn't happening across Ireland to the extent that it was happening on your farm, and you could see that you were back 10 kg in growth over the summer. And I suppose it's very beneficial to be able to investigate that further on PastureBase Ireland. And look, you said yourself when you were looking back at it, you weren't able to take out as much silage during the summer. Was it
Yeah,
that was
like
kind of
in general, you'd take 2 or 3 paddocks for, extra bales. Like, this year it just didn't happen. Like we're looking there in from July onwards, we were on 12-hour strip hours, like, trying to get in and out and not do damage in summertime, which is a bit mad, but yeah, that's where we're at, like, So.
yeah. So the conditions were tough, but you still focused on keeping grass in the diet. And I suppose it's very useful to be able to look back and see, that it actually was happening. You were feeling that there was a pinch on grass, but you can actually see that there was a 10 kg reduction in dry matter per day over that period. So I suppose moving on from that, you've been in the on-farm clover 150 program, as you said, in the last 2 years. So I suppose the objectives of that clover 150 program is to maintain hermitage production at about 14 tons of dry matter per hectare. I suppose that's the one area that we're really, we're trying to focus on now for 2023, and similar to yourself, Patrick, you're trying to focus on that too. Reduce the chemical fertilizer to 150 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. And in turn, by doing this, we'll find a reduction in the nitrogen surplus on our farm gate. So we're trying to get that down to 130 kilograms of nitrogen, and that's about the equivalent of a nitrogen use efficiency of about 40%. Increasing clover content to 20% on farm. So I suppose, Patrick, you're a very good reflection of that your clover contents are in 20%. So the paddocks that you're reducing on, there's enough clover there to supplement the reduction in chemical nitrogen. And maintaining your farm feed self-sufficiency would be very important alongside all this. So just looking at the group averages on the Clover 150
Sorry,
program.
Ciaran, just for 2 seconds, there might be a few people on the webinar tonight who maybe they haven't come across in surplus before or in UE, I suppose a new area in terms of trying to make the best use of nitrogen as we can. Maybe could you explain it just a little bit more in detail, like maybe where the averages are for Irish farmers, like?
Yeah, so I suppose the in surplus is the amount of nitrogen that comes into the system but isn't used fully within the system. So what we would see is nitrogen coming into the farm. It would come in chemical fertilizer. It would come in bought supplement, so bought concentrates. It would come in livestock, and it can also come in maybe imported slurry, that'd be more unusual. But the main two that we're focusing on is the chemical fertilizer and your bought-in concentrate. And then I suppose how that's used on farm. So, your output from your farm is either your milk solids produced or your livestock that's sold, or your average daily gain if you're in a beef farming system or on a sheep farming system. So you want to make that the most efficient system that you can. So every kilogram of chemical nitrogen that comes in, is utilized to the best that it possibly can be. So approximately in Ireland at the moment, we're only at about 25% nitrogen use efficiency on farms. So we're trying to get that to 40%. And the nitrogen surplus is around 130 is the target. But, we're sitting around 170, 180 at the moment. So again, to improve that, we're looking to reduce the chemical fertilizer that's there. And I suppose the best reduction that we can get on that is the more likelihood that we'll be more environmentally friendly as a system. The nitrogen surplus, the lowest we can get that, the less that can be lost from our farms. So we're trying to really focus on that figure. And I suppose that's just a key to the program. Once we're reducing nitrogen fertilizer, we're really having a benefit on the reduced nitrogen surplus.
Okay, so it's essentially try and grow the grass but reduce the surplus and make be as efficient as we can, essentially.
Yeah. So I suppose looking at the performance across the 4 years of the Clover 150 program, so we can see we've had a good increase in area since 2020. So we're gone from 10% up to 65%. The average clover content is increasing on these the whole time. So I suppose that's as a result of better grazing management. As Patrick mentioned, when he put clover on farm at first, he wasn't, necessarily minding the paddocks to keep clover in it. He was just hoping to get a milk solids production benefit. And once he started minding those paddocks for clover with better grazing management, the contents would go up on those. So I suppose we've seen that within the group. However, we've seen similar across the country, this reduction in annual tonnage. So that's where our focus is going. We're trying to get this figure back up to the 14 tonnes that we had in 2020. And I suppose we're kind of seeing that from this, big drop from 230 kilograms of chemical nitrogen down to 150 kilograms of chemical nitrogen this year. And I suppose to bring it back, the 150 kilos of nitrogen is our target to get to, but only when enough the farm has that clover area and the 20% clover content. So we're trying to get there, but we've just tried to get there a bit too quickly for the area of clover that we have on our farms. So next year we'll focus on, the precision nitrogen that PastureBase allows. You'll see your clover contents when you're spreading fertilizer, and you're reducing on the ones that have enough clover. But if you don't have enough clover, they're getting the nitrogen in either chemical or organic that they need. And we can see, as we were discussing earlier, the improvements that you can have on your nitrogen use efficiency by reducing that nitrogen surplus on farm.
Perfect. Yeah. So that's before we move over there, Caitlin, just over to the PastureBase, there's probably a question in there. It probably links exactly to what you're saying there, Caitlin, and maybe it's trying to find that sweet spot in terms of there's a question there. Patrick, you feel maybe a little bit tight on chemical nitrogen? Do you feel that you were a little bit tight on chemical nitrogen, that it might have cost you a little bit of growth? Maybe, Patrick, maybe you feel that just maybe wasn't as high in terms of clover percentage as you thought? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Maybe we did reduce it a little bit too much, but I find the ones that have 20+% clover will definitely grow the grass with 120 units of fertilizer, Probably the issue there is if you're blanket spreading the farm and you're only going out with a half bag, and you might go on two that don't have enough clover on it, but therefore you're going to be obviously not feeding that grass enough, and you're going to be down tonnage, And I think that's probably what Caitlin was getting at. As a group, we've probably done that a bit. We probably aimed the whole farm rather than our clover paddocks, isn't that it?
Yeah. So I think, and I think that probably is the key thing. And is it, the last meeting we were at, is just that trying to be, you really have to keep an eye on what the percentages are in the paddock, and base your decision off that. It's going to be a little bit more difficult when you're doing your, if you're doing your weekly spread, you probably will be changing your fertilizer spreader a good bit, but I suppose from our point of view, and well, especially my point of view, I think a lot of people who are on this call tonight, their systems are built around growing 14 ton, and there probably has been maybe a drop off. Like there's probably people who are here, they're a lot higher stock than you are, Patrick, and probably they've seen a little bit of a drop off in grass growth over the last year or two, along with a drop off in nitrogen. So it's important that how can we get the farm back to growing the 14 ton again? And it's probably, a mix of everything we're talking about there in terms of targeted nitrogen, more measures, soil fertility, all the different factors. Okay. So look, we're just going to get going on some of the reports here with Patrick. So again, look, there's going to be people here who are very familiar with this. There's going to be people who are new to PastureBase. So again, on the left hand side of the home screen, you have the dashboard here on top. We have a load of subheadings down the left hand side. I suppose down and then on the reports we have I suppose the various different reports throughout the year. I suppose we're going to very quickly start with the scorecard, and as as Ciaran said already, like this was on the PastureBase website over the last couple of years, and you could have filled it in, you could fill it in at the end of every year, I suppose. But Ciaran has brought this into the website this year. It's automatically filled in. Okay, so I suppose this is really about giving, it gives you a score based on how you have done in terms of your PastureBase performance through the year, and both your PastureBase performance in terms of a few KPIs, but also the use of the platform, okay? Because as in what we were talking about already, we feel the more you use this, the more information you'll put in, the more information it gives back to you, okay? So, and very, very quickly, just to run down through a couple of the questions and to show you where it gets some of the information on. Very, very quickly there, you can see there, you're just giving yourself a score from 0 to 3 on each question. Excuse me. So first question there again on your how many grass measurements did you complete, and you're going to so Patrick obviously has more than 30 done there, but you can then click into the different reports there where you can get that information, or where the scorecard is pulling the information from in there. Okay, so the amount of paddocks that were grazed 10 times, we can pull that out of the annual tonnage report, the tons of grass grown on farm, the pre-grazing yield, again a key one that we see in terms of keeping milk yield high, in terms of keeping protein high, in terms of keeping daily live weight gain on beef farms and sheep farms high as well as we're going along. Patrick, very, very quickly, a comment on, I suppose, the spring rotation planners and the feed budget.
I suppose, Joe, these will be the most used. Well, it'll be my most used on PastureBase, especially spring rotation planner sets you up. There's feed budgets there, very good. And then the planner, then the forward predicting wedge during the summer can be very good as well.
I suppose you build the spring rotation planner in, complete a feed budget, and then you do your weekly wedge. A key thing for you, Patrick, is predicting forward 7 days.
Well, that's it, yeah. If you think the growth rate's starting to take off, give yourself an extra 10, see what paddocks you should be pulling out, really, or skipping for bales or whatnot, So.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So again, different questions down here ahead. Okay, so again, log into your own PastureBase account. All right, have a quick look.
I suppose, Joe, I'll just jump in there. Just the one that we would always look at as a big area of improvement. I know there was a question there earlier about who's looking at your organic fertilizer. Or your chemical. I hate to break it to a lot of people, but no one really is interested except yourself. It's really just a thing that you can look at yourself, see where you're going, and particularly looking at paddocks where if they got it or if they didn't get it, and maybe that explains some of the issue then that you might be having in the annual tonnage report. And it's, as I said before, it's all about the amount of data you put in. You're going to get more data out that's going to help yourself make those decisions, and it'll build up over time, and the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And it's something that we really see, the fertilizer thing can really help people to make better decisions, particularly around the compound stuff, your 18-6-12s and that type of fertilizer. going in through the year, and what paddocks need to get it after they've gotten slurry as well, or if they've gotten no slurry in the year.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's probably like, and it's probably something as well there, Ciaran, on that until someone goes after and records a full year, and then you look at, people might be on the high side, and at least that year that you are on the high side, and you can maybe make a conscious step to reduce it, or maybe it's people are maybe slightly overdoing it, maybe with the with slurry at time, in terms of, and then go with nitrogen after, and you don't realize has the tot up on a paddock basis towards the end of the year. So
and it's the other thing about it, Joe, is like, we'd see very few people that start doing that, and if they do it for a year, that they won't go back and do it the next year. Like, so someone gets 1 year of this data and they want it again the following year and the following year and the following year. So it's once you start doing it, you realize what you're missing out on, I suppose.
100%. So again, so again, the reseeding events, having all that information there. Okay, soil samples entered in, we'll show that there in a minute. But okay, so I suppose the first report for you to have a look at there when you're over, I suppose over the next couple of weeks, if you're reviewing, is the scorecard. Okay, but on to the annual tonnage next. Okay, as I said, this is an important one. I suppose it's reviewing, or I suppose it reviews the cumulative tonnage to date. I suppose a key thing then for people here, just at the top of the screen there, the show filters button. Okay, we can toggle this back to previous years if we want. Okay, so we can go back to 22, 21. We can change it to look at maybe the first 3 months of the year, whatever we want. Okay, just in this scenario, and Patrick mentioned it earlier there, there's at oftentimes there can be a field that might be a calf field. It may have been measured a couple of times during the year, and then it was just forgotten about for the rest of the year and washed and measured. This paddock here is one in particular. Okay, so you can maybe just, by selecting the minimum number of covers, you can kind of exclude it, because it can be thrown it can throw the tonnage for a particular block of ground that you were talking about. Okay, so as we can see here, then the annual tonnage report then gives you a breakdown for each individual paddock on your farm. And if you just hover over the green bar on it, or the green and yellow bar, so green is grazing, yellow is silage. If we hover over the green bar, we can kind of see a number of different things: the code, the name of the paddock. If you have the fertilizer, the fertilizer recorded, it'll all come in there. The grazing and silage tonnages are coming in. The last reseed and the varieties are coming into it there as well. Okay, so Patrick, probably a quick comment on you. Probably some of these fields here that you've oversown, and back to that comment earlier about maybe reducing the N and maybe going in at lower covers. Like if we can see this field here, it was oversown with clover this year, 2023. Probably you reduced the nitrogen on it to get the clover to take. There was 10 grazings off it, and it kind of grew 10 ton.
Yeah, so there you are. In that scenario there, you're probably going in at an 800 3 or 4 times straight after oversowing it, so
yeah,
taking it out at lower covers.
So it was reducing your growth rate there on that farm. So I suppose it's back, then that, a targeted approach for oversowing next year, and a targeted approach for reseeding, that you do a couple of paddocks of an oversow, and then maybe a paddock reseed or something like that. But we're not doing huge amounts of the platform, at that one time in spring, because it can put pressure on the farm in terms of the amount of grass that's grown. Okay, so I suppose have a look here at this. I think it's very visual in terms of how we can have a look at what each paddock is producing, and then maybe think back through the year what went on in this paddock, and maybe it's a soil fertility issue, and we will see that in another report there in a minute. But I think it's very visual, brings up in terms of bringing up what tonnage has been grown. Next, on to the farm cover report. Okay. So again, as I said, Patrick said earlier this year. So essentially, this is the farm cover report. It just details how many farm covers you've done throughout the year. So it kind of just goes through the individual months, how many you've done in between, in each month, You can toggle up here at the very top of the screen in each of the different years. Okay, so you can go back to 2022, and if we just do that for Patrick, you can kind of see, as he said, he's done 32 this year, and he said this was probably one of his poorer years. If we go back to last year, the 38 done. So Patrick, maybe why are you doing 5 or 6 a month there in that main growing season?
Well, sure. Look at it. Exactly. It's the main growing season. So you're hitting growth of 80, 90 there. You want to be ahead of yourself. You want to be taking out paddocks in time that they're not running into massive heavy covers,
Yes.
That's really where we're at, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So again, that information. So I suppose what we're looking at, and I think that above 30 covers, I think is essential to maximize the use of the PastureBase platform. Okay, at times we see a lot of people doing maybe between 15 or in around 15 or something like that, and it's kind of dotted as maybe 3 a month throughout the main season or something like that, and maybe 1 in March, and maybe 1 in October, 2 in September, something like that. And it's really and truly it's not enough. Okay, so
Just
we like
on
to
that, Joe, like it's very handy if you have the app on your phone. Like most farmers are walking the farm there, weekly anyway to see what kind of grass they have. Like, so if you have it on your phone, it's very easy to upload it and just sync the phone and it's there. Like, you don't have to go in and sit down at a laptop to upload these covers.
Yeah.
It's very straightforward,
I think, it is, and the app I think is massive. The offline app, I think, bit by bit, more and more people are coming over to it. Maybe Ciaran might give us a comment there in a second, just on the percentages of the covers that are coming in. But
Joe, half the covers are now coming in through the app, alright? Yeah, so it's huge. It's huge.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, doke. Caitlin, do you want to come in there on the farm summary?
Yeah. So I suppose, the next report we're going to go through is the farm summary. And I suppose it's a beneficial report in that you can compare, you've got your year to date, you've got what happened in spring, what happened in summer, and what happened in autumn. So it kind of gives you a nice breakdown of that information. So I suppose one of the key areas is, look, you can see your demand and you can compare it between years as well. And Patrick, you had mentioned that, you thought that your demand in spring, was too high this year, and that was something you were hoping to change for next year. So you're able to keep an eye on it through this farm summary report.
Yeah, look, at this spring we calved down more cows than normal, and usually we'd ship them off early, but we just kind of, I don't know, the way it went, we kept them on farm, and it probably left us a little bit tight going into April, that kind of way. So, yeah.
And I suppose that's something like that you can focus on for next year, with it, and you have the comparisons from maybe 2022 as well, and within the farm summary as well. I suppose another thing to just look at there is the silage yield. You can see the breakdown between spring, summer, and autumn, and within summer this year, Patrick, I suppose you were down from 155 in summer of 2022 in terms of tons of dry matter cut for silage, down to 91 this year in the summer. So I suppose it's nice to see where your actual breakdown of silage bales cut off came from on the farm.
Yeah, and again, look at it. It's the information, how the year went. When you look at this, you can see exactly what's going on and what needs to be addressed, So.
And one thing that Joe mentioned is one of his favorite things that comes out of the farm summary report. If you're looking at your annual tonnage and you're still finding it hard to pick out, what was your best performing, what's not your best performing, you can see your 5 best paddocks and your 5 worst paddocks on the farm. And that gives you a really good, idea for, they're your 5 worst paddocks. Why are they your 5 worst paddocks? Look at your annual tonnage report, look at your soil fertility reports. And look, Joe's gone through the annual tonnage, and you can even see with those, they could have got the same amount of fertilizer as one of your best paddocks, but they mightn't have responded as well.
Yeah, so you're looking at older sorts, maybe, and maybe low P's and K's, so.
Yeah, and you decided, normally, Patrick, you'd receive about 10% of the farm kind of every year, looking back on your older farm summaries. But this year, you were down, you hadn't the opportunity to reseed anything, but you did get over sowing in.
Yeah, normally we do a good bit there in the back end. You cut second cut of silage, and then you'd start taking out paddocks because the silage ground will come back in. But this year it was so wet, we just didn't go at it. But we did do oversowing. Yeah, we oversowed 3-4 paddocks. One of them didn't work at all, and the other 3 are going well. So Yeah, overzone can be hit and miss. Like you have to make sure you have the right pH level in the paddocks, like, you know. So that's something that we've worked on for the last 2 years there with lime. We spread a good bit of lime now over the farm. So hopefully now, look, we'll see it in January when we do the soil samples. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think Joe's going to go through the soil fertility report, but like that'll really help. You know, you pick your paddocks for oversowing. You've seen that it can be successful on 3. It's finding out the reasons that it wasn't successful on that 4th paddock.
Yeah. You can see like it's too low in K, you know.
Yeah, and look at again very, very quickly before we move over to the mapping, but I think this is one of my favorite reports on PastureBase, and I think I suppose it comes into the point that we're all making about the more you put into PastureBase, the more you get out of PastureBase, and like I just think this is phenomenal that you can have information here for yourself where you have your soil tests. So there's, soil tests, as you said, Patrick, you're going to do in a full new suite now, again, this winter time. You can have the soil tests in, the pH, the P and the K. You can have the nitrogen. So you have all your fertilizer recorded. And then over on the right-hand side here, you have the total amount of grazings and the silage cut, okay, per in terms of grazings and the total tonnage of grass that's grown, okay? So all that information there, you can customize your report, then you can change that around, you can go back, you can export that to PDF, hanging up on the wall, in terms of maybe, looking off, printing off some of that information. And I also think that this table there, okay, so when you do put the soil fertility and you put the soil samples into PastureBase, I think this is a very visual table to have. And we come back to talk about overall fertility status. I think sometimes we're talking about, oh well, 3/4 of my farm is good for lime, and 3/4 of it is good for P, and 3/4 of it is good for K. But it really comes back to we have to look at what percentage of my farm is optimum. Okay, what percentage of my farm ticks all these 3 boxes in terms of lime, P, and K, and it's about 40% here on Patrick's milking platform. And as he said, since he's last put soil samples into PastureBase, there's K gone out, there's lime gone out. So Patrick, probably you're expecting to see a little bit of a bump, especially in the lime and the K this winter time.
Yeah, I'd be hoping to see it. Yeah, definitely.
And I suppose, Joe, just to jump in there while you're on that report, at the moment we have a lot of people sending in or getting the link for the milk data coming in, because everyone wants to know how much milk they're producing, I suppose. But you can get a soil test report sent straight in from a couple of the labs in Ireland as well at the moment. So if all you need to do is click the link and make sure that you have your paddock numbers on the boxes when it's going in for the soil test, and it'll be uploaded straight to PastureBase then, and that data is available for you rather than running around. I know people want to have maybe a PDF printed off and put it on the wall of the parlor or whatever, but you can have it on your PastureBase too, and it'll be there forever, I suppose, and it's not going to go anywhere. So instead of maybe trying to find that sheet when the contractor is coming into the yard to find what paddock needs the compound, you have it here all the time at the tip of your fingers, just by signing up to get that in automatically.
100%.
And I suppose, Joe, as well, Patrick has been very reactive to what he's had on his soil fertility results. And I suppose, Patrick, one thing that you mentioned as well about improving on your farm is you want to get red clover in, and you're hoping to see a jump in K on those silage paddocks. But
yeah, well, on the one that I'm hoping to put K or put the red clover in next spring, we say I've backloaded that with K this winter, like, so I'm hoping that it will be up there. But it's index 3 and 4 anyway. I don't see it there on the list, but it is index 3 and 4. So.
And Ciaran, Joe, just a question there before you go into the mapping, about the clover scoring and how they came into PastureBase, I think. So the clover contents are scored just at the moment. Ciaran mentioned that they might come in on a farm walk situation that you'll be able to clover score. But at the moment, if you are wanting to put it in, you can put it in your farm details, and click into the farm details and select what score you're giving it. So Teagasc you can select for each paddock whether it's low, medium, or high, or has farm
paddocks.
Sorry. Yeah. So you can select there whether it's low, medium, or high, and there's a scorecard available that'll tell you what percentage that in. But I suppose the high is 20% plus, the medium is 10 to 20%, and the low is below 10%.
But there will be as Caitlin said, there will be an update next year where you're able to do that on an ongoing basis rather than just trying to estimate it once a year or twice a year on your own farm. So it'll just if nothing else, it'll give you an idea of the profile of the clover on your farm a couple of times a year.
Just on that, Ciaran, if you start off with 10% in the spring, you're probably going to end up with 30 or whatever in the back in the autumn, and that is
100%, yeah, 100%.
Doug. And I suppose last point before we move back for I suppose a brief summary. Caitlin, do you want to come in here on the mapping?
Yeah, so I suppose this is one of my my favorite parts of PastureBase here is the farm map that you can do. So I suppose if you don't have your farm mapped and haven't got a company in to do it, I know there's options out there. You can map it yourself, and it's as simple as putting in your air code and knowing where your paddocks are in the farm and being able to select them. But all the data that goes into PastureBase, can feed back into this map. So Patrick here could see his soil fertility. He can see where the pH is high and where it's low. And if it's not himself spreading the line, maybe he could give that map to the contractor and say, it's these paddocks that are, blue in color that they might need their P, their K, their potassium. You can print all those maps out from your PastureBase. And I think that's particularly useful, as Ciaran said, people are printing off PDFs of their soil fertility reports. You could equally print off your map and have that sticking up in the parlour. And it can just tell you, where to go with your slurry, where to go with your fertilizer, and you can see your clover area here. So if you, just select for clover, okay, the colours aren't coming up as they, oh yeah, sorry, if you just click on paddock there, Joe, and just, so you can see the clover areas that are high on Patrick's farm, and he's able to say, I'm going with half rate fertilizer there during the summer. So it can just be a very useful thing that you can use on PastureBase to help you with decision making, particularly if you're not the one maybe going out with the fertilizer spreader. If it's going out through a contractor, Patrick knows where paddock 22 is, but the contractor mightn't. So it's a good opportunity to use that. I know, Patrick, you don't use it as much because you use the when you're adding fertilizer in, you can see your clover contents on that. But if you're not used to that method, it could be a handy visual to use.
Yeah.
There's loads of difference. So you can have, like, say, on the fertilizer there, your days last fertilized, the soil fertility. There's so much information there. You can even, like, the grass wedge, that weekly grass wedge, you could actually take that out and put that up. Put that up in a parlour in your office or something like that there for other people that are working with you or something like that. So there's huge amount of information there in terms of maybe tweaking the system.
And just there's a quick question, Joe, there, and I do get it quite a lot in terms of importing maps from third party, so the likes of maybe Grasshopper or Grass Tech or something like that. So, the short answer is no, you can't. Well, you can if you want, I suppose, is maybe the longer answer. So you need to get a particular type of file from those companies, and it'll cost you a couple of €100. So generally, the answer is you can't import a PDF or you can't import a simple file. You need a particular type of shapefile, and generally it's not done. It's much easier to just do the map out here, to spend a half an hour doing the map here in PastureBase yourself.
But you can bring the areas into the graph map, just not the map. Yeah, perfect. Okay, doke. So look, we're on the final the straight stretch, as we do call it, around the final, the finish. Patrick, a couple of areas there yourself. I suppose you've mentioned for improvement in 2024. Maybe take us through the couple of points there on, I suppose, why you want to get back to the 14 ton.
Well, look, to be more sustainable, I suppose, and cut out the feed. Like this year, we probably fed an extra 170 kilos there than what we would usually around 700 kilos.
Yeah.
So you can see that effect, like, you're putting in more meal, like you're putting in more concentrates, Again, something there as well, probably looking at spreading a bit more nitrogen on the less clover paddocks, I suppose, would be another thing to be looking at, so.
Yeah. And I suppose, look, we do have the two, in general, we have the 225 plus the slurry on those paddocks that don't have the clover. I think we need to, as I said, if they don't have the clover, they're going to need the fertilizer if we want to grow that 14 ton. It's going to be very, very important. Okay. The red clover yourself, Patrick, have you dipped your toe in the water yet with it, or is this going to be your
we're
first
just going
time?
to try it this spring now to see how we go. Like, look at hearing good reports about it and hoping to get good high protein feed, I suppose, in the shoulders, rather than having to go to a pit, So
Yeah. And I suppose that feed demand, I know you mentioned it earlier about the feed demand in the spring and autumn, but what's your consensus on that?
I think it's essential in the spring, like to see where you're coming from, and not to be getting ahead of yourself either, and also get silage in time, Like it's vital to get grazing early, get grazed off as much as you can, but then maybe a Paddy's Day, have a look at it, see where you're at, you might have to slow down a bit, or yourself, like it's very good, like,
And you said yourself probably as a hangover from the I suppose the higher milk prices, there was probably a few too many cows nearly on the farm at one stage there, and it kind of put you under pressure, did it?
Yeah, look, it did, yeah. And going forward next year, we will know our number, like,
Yes, yeah.
Like this year, it's just because we lost that ton of grass as well, and that you could feel it, like, even with an extra 5 cows, you could feel it, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Didn't have the scope, so, yeah.
Perfect stuff. Great. Brilliant. So I suppose, look at just kind of from a summary point of view, take the time now during December to analyse your 2023 grazing year on PastureBase Ireland. As I said, like, there's so much information there, like over the last few years, there's the new reports being added. And look, there's probably people who are on the call tonight who are new to this. Take a couple of simple ones, sit down with a cup of tea some night and go through them. As you get more experienced over a couple of years and you build up more information, you'll get more used to used to the pasture-based functionality. I suppose bringing into what some of the stuff there that Patrick said, like, and we said at the start, the cost of inputs are extremely high on Irish farms. Okay, I know fertilizer's back a bit, meal is still high. It's vital to focus on good grazing management. And again, that grass growth figure where, or we call it pasture growth, in 2024, we need to just maybe even step it up a little bit on farms. Okay, if stocking rate isn't going to kick back a little bit. Okay, so focus on areas for improvement on your farm, over the winter time, and identify paddocks for improvement. Your spring plan now, and I suppose look at. And just, even discussing there, today on the newsletter, I know we're talking about nitrogen and slurry, but maybe even lime, there's probably paddocks on farms there that meant to get lime the back end of the year there, from September and October. Ground conditions very, very poor. Places have hardened up seriously now over the last week or 10 days. Can you get 10 acres together for a lorry load of lime, over the next week or two? And also the opportunities now to get grazing infrastructure tidied up and ready for next spring, because it's going to be a key thing when we get going to grass. And I suppose the last point on that is to get the 30 walks done. As I said, there's a very small amount of people that are actually doing it regularly year in, year out. Probably a little bit of drop off in this year. Even Patrick said himself, just when things were wet and the growth rates weren't there, that you were probably that you just probably weren't walking as much as probably you should have been. But that, coupled with the chemical nitrogen, the slurry applied, and the soil fertility, you have some picture of what's happening on your farm. The information there is phenomenal. Okay, so get going on some of that. And I suppose the last key point, and we cannot manage what we don't measure. Okay, make a conscious effort to get back to basics in terms of grazing management next year, doing your 30 walks and making critical decisions off that. And I suppose there's loads of information there on the website, on the Grass 10 newsletter, previous webinars in terms of if you need it. And again, look at, my email is there if I can be of help to anyone on in terms of grassland management. Okay. The last point, I suppose, is just to thank the sponsors of the Grass 10 program, Teagasc, the Department of Agriculture, the Farmers Journal, AIB, Grassland Agro, and FBD. And last point before we finish, I just like to thank my fellow panelists on here tonight, Patrick O Neill, Caitlin Looney from Moore Park, and Ciaran Hearn from Moore Park from PastureBase Ireland as well. Look at again, it's super to have a farmer on here who allows you to go to trawl through his pasture-based data, and Patrick is doing a lot of good stuff there, involved in terms of with Ballyhaise and the Clover 150, and it's great to have people above the Galway Dublin line, similar to myself, that to rep us. So
Flying the flag, Joe. Flying the flag.
So listen, thanks a million to everyone as well for tuning in tonight, and have a good trawl through your reports over the win, and we want to wish you all a happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
Sorry, Joe.
Thanks.
There's just one question there about any grass measuring courses coming up in 2024. Before you close off, you can maybe plug a few of the courses.
Yeah, there will be some courses. I suppose again, email me with your particular location at joseph.dunphy@teagasc.ie, and we'll try and get a course that's in a particular area to suit you, either new ones or existing ones. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
Patrick.
Thanks.